So, Stephanie J. Block, congratulations on your second Tony Award nomination for Featured Actress in a Musical. You're contending this year for Falsettos. A couple of years ago, you were up The Mystery of Edwin Drood. They're both revivals, but they were given really fresh, new productions. And the Tony voters recognize that in many categories, including your performance. And I'm here with Sam Ekman, who I know is a huge fan of this show and of your performance in it.
Thanks. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for sitting down with us. I was curious because Falsettos is not often performed. This was its first revival since the original production on Broadway. So with your role of Trina, was that one you always wanted to play? Were you seeking it out? How did you get involved?
You know, it's interesting. I was not familiar with William Finn throughout my whole musical theater career. I do remember back in 1993 or maybe even late 92, there was a gal, I was doing Will Rogers Follies in Branson, Missouri, and there was a gal singing Holding to the Ground backstage, and I immediately went, what is that song and who wrote that? So I learned that piece, that was it. But I didn't kind of delve into the score of March of the Falsettos and Falsetto Land until much later. And I don't know if my palate was mature enough at the time in my early 20s to really grasp the depth and the humanity and the complexities of the score. And then about a month, let's say February of 2015, I got a call, and they were kind of sniffing around just to see maybe interest and availability. I'd given birth the month before, so going back to work wasn't even on my radar. But they said, hey, just take a peek again, let us know what you think. And I listened to the score in its entirety, and now as a mother, and it changed everything for me. How I heard the music, what lyrics made my eyes start to well up, and then I didn't have a choice. I had to go in, I had to get this role, and I had to get to Broadway with this role. I knew this was what I needed to come back to do 8 shows a week. And interestingly, through the course of producers, changing venues, it allotted me another year with my baby girl before we actually came into Broadway. So by the grace of God, I had a little more time at home and still was able to kind of fulfill this dream of playing Trina. But for it to be, you know, one of my career goals, I didn't even know how much I wanted to play this role until I stepped into the shoes of Trina.
Well, it was a phenomenal job. And one of those complex songs is I'm Breaking Down, which for my money is one of the best moments of this entire season, to be honest. And the song it almost reminds me of a Sondheim song, like almost like Worst Pies in London, because it's so complex. Was that something intimidating to you? Was there something special you did to prepare for it?
It was very intimidating. It's interesting that you say that. Both Stephen Sondheim and William Finn went to the same college. They went to Williams College, and they've kind of had these treks like this. But a lot of their sensibilities, like you said, their scores take you to places that you're not expecting to go. You feel like you're on this musical and lyrical ride, and then all of a sudden they take a turn that you're not expecting in any way, shape, or form. Both of them as composers do that. When I first heard Breaking Down, which is almost a 5-minute, you know, neurotic aria, yeah, it was totally intimidating. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to piece this together. Now, of course, I knew James Lapine would hold my hand every step of the way, but it was crazy scary, and we were jumping in like really quick. We had 2 days of musical rehearsal, and then we were in the set. And if you remember, the set was just kind of this big, huge cube that would come apart and make different pieces and different sets and locations. So we had to put down our music books right away and kind of be off book. And that's how I was thrust into I'm Breaking Down. And why I use so many props to begin with, I always do that anyway. I kind of throw the kitchen sink at everything, and I jump in 150%, and then directors usually need to peel me back. But for me, it was like the only way I could keep track of the song was adding a prop to know what lyric came next, then to grab the butcher knife, and that reminded me what came next. And so they were like little bookmarkers for me. And before I knew it, they weren't taking any of these kitchen sinks away. And so truly, I thought, gosh, they're going to start peeling back. And they left every little bit in surprisingly and gleefully, I have to say. And then it was just one rehearsal. I popped the banana in my mouth, and Lapine was like, look, if you can belt that every night without choking, we're going to be keeping the banana, which I never thought in a million years they'd want to keep that nasty banana, but now it lives on.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone sing with a banana before.
Yeah, well, here we go. I usually do crazy things, but I tell you, half the time it's left on the floor in a rehearsal room. So to know that it actually got to the Walter Kerr Theater, it's kind of fun because I'm odd. I'm an odd lady.
Well, you mentioned Finn and Sondheim at the same college, and they also have a connection as James Lapine, who I guess directed the revival, was associated with the original production. Did he want to reimagine it from the original? What was the process? Like, it was a very quick rehearsal period and then a limited run, but what was your relationship like with him from the outset?
Yeah, I think he did want to completely revisit it from a different angle. Both him and Bill were so, and I got to tell you, Andra Bishop and Ira Weissman from Lincoln Center, they all have this really, really intimate marriage with Falsettos because it was such a huge success, an emotional success, and they were just, what they like to say, babies in the industry. You know, they're in their early 30s, they're just starting out at playwrights, and this piece came to them at a time in New York when their friends were passing, and they were just lifting art up as a kind of healing mechanism. So that whole memory of creating it 30 years ago or 25 years ago was so intimate to them that I think they were a little hesitant to bring it back. But Andre Bishop said he went back to the Lincoln Center Library. He watched the first 6 minutes of the play and said, no, there's not a doubt in my mind. This has to be brought back, and it has to be brought back now. He felt it was even more potent this time around because now we're adding the kind of definition of what a normal family is, which is very much part of today's conversation. The political climate, which, you know, kind of embodies every sentence that anybody says these days. And so they decided, if we're going to do this, if we're going to take on this brand new revival, we're not going to do it the way we did it 25 years ago. And in comes, you know, David Rockwell with his genius set piece. I think James also noticed, we had a conversation one day that I found very interesting, is that 25 years ago, they had to present it in a much more kind of buoyant and almost strident and happier, sillier place, because the wounds of AIDS was still so raw and so present that they couldn't go to that sort of depth and really heavy emotional place, or people wouldn't even hear the material. They'd be sobbing from the first note until the curtain. And they wanted to make sure that the material actually reached the audience. And the only way to do that was to kind of separate yourself a little bit from it, to be a little more absurd, if I could use that word, and a little sillier and strident. So now that we've got this time and space of 25 years, we as a cast just ask them, you know, can we go a little deeper? Can we be a little more raw? Can we try to reach for more tears in our characters and see how that translates? And luckily, we were able to tell the story in that way now in 2016, 2017. And I think it made it very special. It certainly made it very special to us as a cast. We bonded instantly because we were telling a story that perhaps in the beginning of rehearsal, we almost went too far. We went too emotional, too heavy and dark with it. And then we had to kind of add the levity as we went. But because we approached the material in that way, what we did as a cast and how we fell in love with each other so quickly, I think added to the production. It certainly added to my show and to, I know it sounds a little dramatic, but to my life. I love these guys. I love this cast. We still talk every single day, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because in sort of every interview I've seen, or, you know, every social media post I see, you guys
it's a love fest, right?
Yeah, it's a love fest. What you don't often see that, especially after a show has left us.
I know.
Falsettos has. Did you have to did that just come out of the rehearsal process, or was there a certain thing you had to get? It seems like such a great bond you have.
It came out of the rehearsal process. It came out of the love of the material and these characters. We dined together every day. We would go out after rehearsal. We would have slumber parties. Actually, I'm having a slumber party at my house next week for the cast. And it really was just a constant either text thread or email thread, or we just missed each other when we weren't together, or someone would have an idea and kind of have a conference, you know, texting, what do you guys think about, should we bring this tomorrow and see how this works? And as Paul had mentioned, you know, the rehearsal period was so quick that if we kind of didn't saturate ourselves for at least those 5 weeks, we knew we weren't going to really touch on what needed to be touched on for this piece. So we dedicated those 5-8 weeks to the piece, to each other, and made a whole lot of mistakes in the beginning, and then found our way as a family. And it's an irreplaceable, really irreplaceable rehearsal process.
Yeah.
You know, oh, sorry, Sam. I was just going to say we're an awards website and we write about the Tonys a lot. And so what you ordinary in that this show was closed months before the nominations came out, and so many of you being recognized. So given that you were sort of talking every day, was the day before the Tony nominations, was there a lot of texting and the morning of?
Yes, it's interesting because we all just sent love out to each other. Brandon and I are probably the most neurotic, which I'm sure you sense from our performances. So we call each other Crazy One and Crazy Two. So Crazy One would reach out to me and be like, I can't think of anything else. Crazy Two would be like, well, then let's meet for dinner. We met for dinner the day before. It was something, but we also knew that what we had was lightning in a bottle. We also know the business part of show business. And like you mentioned, you know, our beautiful show closed almost 4 months before the Tony noms came out. So we hoped, but we certainly didn't expect for anything, because so many new shiny shows had opened up to great acclaim and great reviews. And we just prayed that what we did was potent enough that it made an impression. And so when it does, for people like the Tony Committee that get to see everything, that have, you know, knowledge in theater, and they still remember, I got to tell you guys, it feels like a real high compliment, and one we don't take lightly. And so we are celebrating as a company, because we really do feel we walked into this holding hands, loving each other, and to be able now to walk through award season holding hands with each other, it kind of doesn't happen that way. So somehow we've been blessed, and we recognize it, and we're sucking in every second, and it's been a real joy.
And this is your second time nominated from a show that was a limited run that is closed. You were nominated for Mystery of Edwin Drood. Yeah. So do you like that schedule? Do you get to see all of the nominated shows afterwards?
I do get to see a lot of the shows. Do I like the schedule? That's such an interesting question. It's kind of a blessing and a curse. I like not having to rush from a show to all these amazing events and, you know, fretting about, I'm sweaty, I'm tired, I'm XYZ. But do I miss my show every single day? Do I wish we were still doing the work every single day? I'd be lying if I said no. I really do wish I was in that hectic schedule and still delivering this story and this performance. So you're right. I mean, both Roundabout and Lincoln Center, they always start off their schedule with a limited run, and there are times where it, you know, continues on. We did know with Falsettos, because Christian was already committed to Willy Wonka, that more likely than not, this was going to be 14 weeks. But of course, Crazy One and Crazy Two, you know, every time we saw how the audience would respond, or I stayed clear of all the reviews until, believe it or not, just 2-3 weeks ago, I finally read the reviews. But I kept praying that maybe we could continue. It, again, was going to be a bittersweet thing, because Christian, I called him our foundation. Christian, you know, led this story. And I knew if another actor came in, the storytelling would be different, but the story would be the same. And I really felt the merit of the story in this day and age, and how the audience just was sucking in the lyrics in a different and new way every single performance. So I would have desperately missed Christian. However, I got to tell you, these words still ring in my head on a daily basis. Anytime I watch the news or come across something and I go, oh man, this is so topical.
So you mentioned, you know, way back when in the 90s, you were in Branson, Missouri. So you first sort of came on our radar in the early 2000s, about 14 years ago, playing this icon opposite Hugh Jackman as her husband, Peter Allen, in The Boy from Oz. And while Falsettos was this limited run and people gravitated to it, I mean, that Boy from Oz, I think, he ran for a year. I mean, it was sort of standing room only. What would, just take us back to that experience as your Broadway debut, being in the hottest show in town with Hugh Jackman, who wins the Tony Award.
Paul, it was crazy. I mean, I did not see Boy from Oz coming in any way, shape, or form. I moved out to New York. I attempted when I was 22. That's a whole different story. So when that didn't work out, I just wasn't spiritually ready to be in this big bad city. I went back home to LA. They were developing Wicked, Stephen Schwartz and Winnie Holzman with Universal Pictures producing. And so I worked for 2 years on the production of Wicked during the readings and workshops out in the West Coast. And when it was going to come to New York, that's what got me out here, being part of the original company for Wicked, and that was completely my goal for that to be my Broadway debut. And when my agents called and said, you know, do you do Eliza? I thought, well, no, not really, but I'm very familiar with her canon and I love her, and I haven't been in the city that long, so anytime I could get in front of a new producer, a new director, a new casting director, I said yes. So that really happened so quickly. I auditioned on a Monday during a lunch break from Wicked rehearsals. I had a dance call on a Tuesday, the very next Tuesday on my lunch break. I had a call back the next Monday where I was supposed to be on an airplane going to San Francisco with the cast of Wicked for the out-of-town tryout, and I stayed back to have a chemistry test and a 2-hour audition with Hugh Jackman on that Monday. And I left the room kind of my head in the clouds going, yeah, how did this even happen? And a half hour later, I got a call with the offer for Liza Minnelli. So my whole path changed. And I went out of town with the original company of Wicked, but as you said, my Broadway debut was a completely different Oz. So I got 2 Oz's for the price of one. Very unexpected, and it was awesome. It was probably one of my biggest challenges, not only because it was my Broadway debut, but as you mentioned, playing a living icon who is still at the forefront of all of our minds, especially those of us that love musical theater. She was on the headlines during that time. She was just marrying David. I mean, she was everywhere. So to tackle Liza Minnelli, whoa, that was really something. Again, I kind of, thank God I was naive and just wide-eyed and excited to take on the role, because had I really sat there and thought about it, I think I would have scared myself out of it. One of the greatest learning experiences. Hugh is everything you want him to be. He's gracious. He is the most generous leader. Dressing room door always open, welcoming everybody. And he really was an extraordinary leading man. So I am so grateful that that was my debut. But boy, I never saw that coming. And it's interesting. I've met Liza a couple times since, and she's so lovely. And I wish she would have seen the show. She didn't. Fred Ebb came to see it, and I think he protected her in a way and said, he calls her Liza May. Her feelings might have been hurt in the sense that she would have had to sit there in an audience with people watching her life and watching the death of her first husband, watching the death of her mama. And I think that would have been a difficult spot to be in. So he said, you know, just know they're respectful of you and of Peter. But he really kind of said, I think you should not go see the show. Had we maybe just given her a dress rehearsal strictly for her, I hope she would have appreciated the performance, because I tried to be extremely respectful and honor her and her mom and her husband.
In terms of other things that came out of Wicked, that sort of, if memory serves, in a roundabout way, you were able to meet your husband, Sebastian Arcelus, who was playing Fiyero. Was that on tour?
That was on tour, yeah. I was finishing out the year. He was just coming in. I think maybe I had 6 weeks left, and speaking of gracious, I was not very gracious. I was one tired Elphaba. So when I knew we were getting in a new Fierro and I met him and I thought, oh boy, he's lovely, but I'm going to have to do extra rehearsals. I'm vocally tired. I'm on the final stretch. I loved the show, but really I kind of lived like a nun when I did that show. It's a heavy thing, as you guys know. And so my Mondays were quiet. I would sleep in. I mean, I barely did anything else but the show. So to know that I had to kind of run the songs and now 10 years later into our marriage, I like to joke that Adina got the Tony, but I got the Sebastian. So it all worked out just fine.
Oh, it's interesting. And also your obvious graciousness rehearsing with him, because then you're in that same position when you go into Anything Goes.
You're totally right. Totally right.
And that, I mean, fans of yours love about both Trude and now this show is because you're originating the roles and you're getting nominated for Tonys, as you well deserve. But what is that like to step? I mean, so Sutton Foster's won the Tony Award. It's again, you seem to have this knack for picking the biggest hit shows of every season. So now you're stepping into her top shoes on Anything Goes.
Yeah, I do have a motto that if it scares me and I'm not going to endanger myself or others, then I need to say yes, because that's the only way that I will truly kind of expand and grow. And this really was scary. And you're right, I'd never been put into a show. The cast was so lovely. They were so supportive. Now, I didn't realize when Kathleen Marshall called and said, you know, do you think you could learn the show within 7 to 10 days? I lost my breath and I thought, okay, crap. Yeah, I think I can. I'm gonna say yes. But I didn't, because I'd never been put into a show, I didn't realize that it's already a well-oiled machine. And so I wouldn't have the 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. rehearsal schedule that I'm used to. So it really was Monday day off, start on Tuesday with the dance captain and the stage manager, 5 hours, watch both shows on Wednesday, have 5 hours on Thursday, a costume fitting on Friday, watch the show Friday, watch both shows. My total in rehearsal time was 23 hours. So I learned that entire show in 23 hours. And next thing I knew I was on. I cannot tell you what the hell happened that first performance. I have no recollection whatsoever. It really was people just lovingly pulling me, not necessarily on stage, but off stage. Costume changes, I would just stand there and it would be like literally a NASCAR pit team coming and changing everything for me. But I'm grateful that I had those 5 weeks while Sutton was doing her pilot, and then Roundabout invited me back to finish out the last 6 months. And it was exciting. I mean, it was one of those revivals that I had not been able to do kind of a really wonderful American songbook score. So to sing Cole Porter, to have 8-minute tap numbers, all of which these were in my tool belt from my regional theater days. I mean, you have to have, you know, all of these kind of older shows, our real old faithfuls, to even work. But when I came to New York, I was lucky enough to do a lot of original productions that I hadn't used my tools of tap dancing in almost a decade. So it was a really wonderful going back into that music and glamour. Oh my God, the costumes and the lipstick and it was very different from playing, you know, the Pirate Queen or Elphaba, or all that glamour was kind of delicious.
And in addition to your Broadway career, I think a lot of theater fans, myself included, have sort of Stephanie J. Block binge YouTube nights. I'm
sorry, you went down the wormhole, Paul.
I'm currently obsessed with your rendition of Brian Darcy James' song from the Wild Party at the Miscast Gala. Is it hard to watch yourself in those, or do you like that those all exist online?
It's very hard to watch. There's maybe 3 or 4 that I can stomach. And then the rest, you know, you always nitpick. It's very interesting, you know, because as a live theater performer, that's kind of the beauty. You get to go out there, you get to make choices, you get to make mistakes, and then you go, okay, well, that one's gone, and you know, let's start fresh on Wednesday matinee. And now, like you said, they're living online for forever. So anytime I see one of those, I go, oh man, but I did that so much better, or oh boy, I would have made a different choice there. I'm glad it's out there, because I do recognize, as a musical theater nerd from Southern California who couldn't get to Broadway, anytime something was on PBS, anytime someone had a black market audio tape, you know, I too would suck it in and fall in the wormhole. But YouTube and all that stuff didn't exist when I was that young girl back in California. But if it existed now and I was that 15-year-old girl, I'd do nothing else. I would do nothing else but watch the musical theater on the YouTube.
Well, what I think, and what isn't on YouTube, but would be at Lincoln Center Library, would be the film version of 9 to 5. And you talk about, you know, you were involved in that right from the outset. And when you get something like Falsettos, that everything comes together, Burning Bright Nova, and then something like 9 to 5, the component parts, and you're playing the Jane Fonda role, and Allison Janney's Lily Tomlin, and then Megan Hipsey is the Dolly Parton part. And it just somehow doesn't all work. What's that experience like, where you can sort of feel like it's just not quite?
Well, you know, we all have answers. All of us like to say, if they just came to me, you know, I would have been able to fix it, right? We all have our opinion. Like you said, the components were all there. That was one time that I went, oh, I'm going to Pottery Barn to decorate my dressing room, because we are going to be here for a long time. Next thing I know, I'm schlepping my Pottery Barn furniture back to storage. But the experience was still so much fun. Working with Dolly Parton, wouldn't trade that in a heartbeat. I can't. The musical genius that is Dolly Parton, and her being at the helm, literally she would change the energy in a room. Everybody wanted to be a better musician, a better person, and that just trickled down. So if you look at that experience kind of in a time capsule, it's still one of my happier experiences, because going into work every day was pure joy, and it really was laughter and smiles, and she'd go over to the piano or play her fingernails on a table to give us the new beat and the new kind of feel of the song. I remember Joe Mantello would say, this verse isn't quite right, we'd break for lunch, and she would come back and hand out paper plates with new lyrics written down, because she would go out for a slice of pizza or something and just frantically start writing. Mind you, I've kept all that. So it just, no, you're right. We didn't stick around as I envisioned we could have. I don't know if I could have used the word should have, but it was a different season on Broadway. Everything was really serious, right? We had, I can't even list the shows, but it really was high drama, heavy weighty material, meaty material. And then we just wanted to be this musical that you walked out happier than when you walked in. And it just didn't translate that season.
Well, I know you're actually heading off right now to do your workshop on something, and hope maybe that'll be something we're talking to you about in a season or two as another Tony nominee. But listen, congratulations on this nomination.
Thank you.
And as I said, to be remembered, the nominating committee for a show that closed in January certainly bodes well that the voters also saw that show. I mean, it was the hot ticket last winter. So best of luck on June 11th.
I thank you both for your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.